Hello and welcome back to Piecemeal Painting. So in the last video, you saw me work on the sky and changing the color from a darker color at the top to a lighter color at the bottom. And I used that same principle when it came to the mountain, actually all the mountains there in the background, as well as the background of the temple behind the figure here. So with all of that said, I've got a layer of paint which is still semi-wet on the mountain there. I'm going to add some texture to it here today. So I've mixed some burnt umber, white, and a little bit of yellow to make this lighter version of the color of the mountain. Very often mountains will have the same coloration to it, obviously darker away from the light, lighter toward the source of light. And you'll also find that as things get further in the distance, they get lighter as well. They call that atmospheric or aerial perspective. So we're going to be taking what's called a palette knife. Very often they are metal, but because we're a bit more of a budget sort of video channel here, we're going to be using a plastic one that just came with the set of brushes I have. And of course the brushes are also budget as well. And that just allows people to try out painting, to get some experience with it, but not using the most expensive tools. Obviously, if you have access to an art store and at the moment you're able to buy something a little more higher end, maybe a metal palette knife, that certainly will work too. So I've got some of this color here. I'm just going to load one side of the palette knife with that color. And while that paint is still relatively wet, we're just going to drag some of that paint down over the mountain there. And that's going to create a really interesting textured effect. What it's essentially doing is it's breaking up the paint. So we're just taking that nice and light touch, just kind of going over to create that really rocky, mountainous sort of feel to the work there. Great big globs of paint and just kind of lightly dragging them down to create those variations in color you often get when it comes to crevasses and jagged areas of the mountain here and there. Again, always following the shape of the mountain itself as we get some effects in there. We get some really nice effects in our work that way. If it was a snow-capped peak, obviously I could use more white. So I've got some white right here. Just gonna add a little bit of that white to the palette knife. And just we can add some of that in there just for some extra variety. You get some really neat effects. And tried out, the plastic palette knife does a fairly decent job of making those mountainous effects, but I will be demonstrating using a metal palette knife as well if you have a chance to upgrade it, because that will get some interesting effects there as well in the work. But just kind of dragging that paint out, and it creates a bit more of an indistinct sort of shape, but also something which looks more mountainous, more random. You can't get that kind of effect with just the brush itself. So try it out, experiment a little bit, see what works for you. And again, don't worry if your first attempt doesn't look amazing. Very often you'll find that these effects come with more practice. I'm still working on practicing that effect as well. When you're working on edges, especially architectural edges in a painting, I also recommend just buying some painter's tape. And that can be great just to make sure that your lines are nice and straight. So for example, this column, once I did the background, you'll notice the column is not very straight at the moment. So I'm gonna have to go over that. And I'm gonna make sure that I've got the paint tape on there when this dries to make sure I've got a crisp edge for the columns and the wall. So I'll be working next on column wall as well as the trees here in the midground. And then next video, we'll talk about doing some work with painting the face. So I hope you found that helpful. Again, I'll be working on this kind of off camera a little bit more, just adding some more details here and there, just kind of touching up a little bit where the paint can create that more mountainy effect. And we'll see how it turns out. Hope you have a chance to give it a try. And if you do, and you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you find the content to be to your liking, you may want to subscribe as well to the channel. And if you think a friend might enjoy some of these videos, please feel free to send them their way as well to share. So thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye now.